All right, good evening. It is December 3rd. I'm going to call the Board of Commissioners meeting to order. Tonight we are joined by Miss Shelby Blackman from the Andrew Chamber of Commerce. She is going to lead us in the pledge and invocation. If you'll join us.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Let us pray. Lord, thank you for allowing me to be here tonight, and thank you for each person in this room who cares so much about the Andrew community, that they come out to make sure that their voices are heard. I thank you for every department head here, and Lord, I'm especially thankful with event time rolling around for Andrew Public Works and the Andrew Police Department. Be with each commissioner tonight and the mayor, and may every decision that's made be your will and your will only. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Bob, can I talk a minute about Christmas?
Absolutely. There's a reason Miss Shelby joined us tonight, so please take a moment.
That's right. We have Christmas on the Square coming up this Friday night. It's going to be at the Andrew Depot, 6 to 8:30. It is a 100% free community event. We have hay rides to a live nativity at Jack Marley Park. We have train rides for the kids. Manna Church is sponsoring the train this year, so there'll be free popcorn. We have Bernie Sweets and more of Irwin cookies, homemade hot chocolate, visits with Santa. And I'm really excited this year. We have his radio broadcasting live from the gazebo this year. So I'm very excited about this year's event. It's really come together really well. And we couldn't do it without our sponsors, so I very much appreciate everyone who sponsored Christmas. Mm-hmm. And then we turn around on Saturday morning at 10 o'clock. We have the largest parade in Andrew's history. We have 101 entries. One of the entries has 20 vehicles. So get prepared for a long one, but I'm so excited. It seems like the Chamber's done everything big this year, and so we're ending it with a bang. 21 ribbon cuttings coming up Tuesday. So it's been a really good year for the Chamber, but come out to the Christmas events and get into the Christmas spirit and just have a sense of community with us.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So come out. It's going to be cold. Bundle up and settle in. And thank you, Shelby, for everything you do, organizing all of this stuff for the town. All right. We all have the agenda in front of us. Are there any amendments to the agenda?
I'd like to amend the agenda slightly at the end to include a discussion about personnel along with our land acquisition in closed session.
All right. If there's no discussion, all those in favor, raise your right hand. Unanimous? Is there a motion to approve the amended agenda?
I make a motion we approve the amended agenda.
All those in favor, raise your right hand. Unanimous. All right, consent agenda. We have approval of the minutes. We've all had a chance to review those, so I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda as written.
All those in favor, raise your right hand. That's unanimous. All right, we have two presentations tonight. First, we're going to start with Davenport. It's going to speak to us about how much money we could borrow. That's not what they call it. They call it financial feasibility report.
Very good, Mr. Mayor. We could probably simplify it to that. We'll throw a couple other things in there as well. We have, I probably should have handed these out already, but thank you. Make sure they're stacked. It should be more than enough. And we'll, yeah, if it could be. Fantastic. And for Mayor and the board, Kyle Laux with Davenport, nice to see you. I think it's been about a year since we've been here, so a couple new faces. Nice to maybe meet you and see you for the first time. We've had the good pleasure of working with the town for probably about 7-8 years or something along those lines. And so you've obviously changed and grown a lot in that time period. And we appreciate the opportunity to be here and give the update. What you have in front of you is the exact same things you'll see on the screens. We'll walk through that. Happy to answer questions as we go. We'll give a second there for it to get pulled up. I guess, Mayor and members of the board, while we wait for it to show up on the screen there, what I will say on the front end is that I think what we have tonight is good news. Maybe I'll just preface that. We got a whole bunch of pages and numbers, and we'll talk through that. But the town is in very good financial shape, and we'll talk about why that is and what we see in that and some of the trends and a couple of recommendations around some policies you can put in place going forward to make sure you continue to be in good shape. But maybe while we're waiting for it to show up on the screen, I'll just kind of preface that and maybe set the table there, in that I think what we have is good news, and hopefully give you a little bit of information as you think about, obviously, the police station, think about some other capital projects. How do you take those in the context of the overall town, your finances, your ability to borrow dollars, but also make sure we're putting dollars away in reserve, make sure we're protecting against some of the downside that could happen. We've been on a really nice run here, and the region has been on a nice run for a while at this point. We do a lot of work in your area. So a lot of what we're going to talk about is how do we make sure we maximize what you're able to do with those finances, but at the same time make sure we're responsible with them, make sure we've got policies that put in place definitively what a good roadmap is going forward. So with all of that as maybe a little bit precursor, we've got it up on the screen here, and we can kind of go relatively speaking page by page, and again, happy to answer questions as we go. But if you can get one more page for me in terms of topics for discussion, we'll work sequentially through this. Sort of start with at the very beginning, we'll do some peer comparatives. We like to show not just what you're doing as a town, clearly, but also what your neighbors are doing. And we've got a kind of smattering, if you will, of peer towns. There's one city in there, but towns from your size and even up in terms of population. The theory there being, lets you see a continuum of where you are now and knowing that you're growing, some larger but also still growing towns in the area. So we'll do that first. Next, we'll do a little bit of history in terms of finances, and we'll get to that as we get into the details. We'll talk a little bit about your existing debt, which is very, very minimal. So as we talk about the debt profile, your ability to borrow dollars for new capital projects, you start in a very strong position as you have a very small amount of debt to begin with, so you're in a good position to be talking about these things. And then last, at the back of the presentation here, we'll talk specifically about the police station, some of the updated numbers there. We'll factor in some park projects we understand you're thinking of. That's always at your discretion, not for us to tell you, for you to tell us. But we want to give you what that looks like and that sense of things so you can further that in your discussions. So that's what we'll talk about. I think if we flip a couple pages in, just go right to page 5, the peer comparative. What we have here, as I mentioned, is a selection of towns, not necessarily scientific per se. You may say there's some other people we want to see in this. We're happy to add that as a follow-up, but really designed to give you a sense of growing towns from your size or larger in the greater Raleigh area, as so much of our area has been growing so quickly. And so you can see folks in Harnett, folks in Wake, folks in Johnston, in that general area. And if we flip the page, you can see there in terms of population where you are at about 7,000, if we've got that right, clearly growing as we drive around, and sort of a continuum there from the Lillingtons, the Selmas, maybe even the Dunns that are in and around your range, all the way up to Clayton, city of Sanford, that are much, much larger than you are in terms of population, but again, give you kind of that continuum of the various folks. One thing I'll point out of this chart is that we've included credit ratings. What you'll notice is that you as a town don't have a credit rating. You don't need one right now, but a lot of the planning and thinking that we do is built around if at some point we decide, and at your discretion, that we want and or need a credit rating, let's make sure we're putting the pieces in place to be able to show ourselves as well as we can to the rating agencies. And so as you look there, there's 3 major rating agencies, Moody's, S&P, and Fitch. The larger, the Claytons, the Sanfords, have very strong credit ratings, and while you are smaller than they are, you're going to share a lot of the same demographics, a lot of the same growth profile, and right now you share a lot of the same financial profile as well. So we give you that as a little bit of perspective, knowing that you're growing and evolving so quickly. So we'll flip next. You can just flip right to page 8. Thank you. Again, just a little bit of history here. What we've taken here is the last 5 years of revenues, and this is right out of your audit. The last audit, FY 2023, so about a year plus old, obviously working on 24. Understand that's going well in terms of how that year is ending, just don't have the audit quite yet, which is very normal for this time of year. But a couple observations as we look at your overall town revenues over that 5-year time period. If you can scroll down a little bit more to the table, point out a couple numbers here, not all of them. Top of the table there, in terms of your ad valorem taxes, your other taxes and licenses, and the unrestricted intergovernmental. Those 3 biggies are kind of your primary general fund revenue streams. This is not water and sewer, purposely separate. That is separate and aside and self-supporting. But what you see as you look at really the ad valorem, the unrestricted intergovernmental, is a very healthy level of growth over that last 5 years. You take your eye to the far right, that concept of a CAGR, a CAGR, it's a compound average growth over that 5-year time period. What that's telling you is that your ad valorem tax revenues are growing on average each year at 13.6%. That's a really healthy level of growth. It's not the same each and every year. Obviously, revals and things make it not necessarily the same level each year. That's a very substantial 5-year average growth rate. The other line item, look at there, the unrestricted intergovernmental. We're not auditors or accountants. They just kind of lump a bunch of stuff together. But what's within that line item are local sales taxes, motor fuels tax, utility franchise, some of those things, and some of those consumer discretionary types of revenues. And you can see that growth trend at about 17% on average each and every year. So clearly a very strong economy in terms of the overall region. Also, as you grow and those business establishments continue to either grow or expand or get added here, those revenues continue to grow. And so some very, very healthy trends there in terms of the revenues. The one other I'll point out here is investment earnings. So it's kind of, second to the bottom there. And you can see how between 2022 and 2023, how much of those jumped. And so maybe if you've looked at hopefully your own savings accounts, things like that, rates on what you can earn on dollars in the bank have jumped substantially in the last couple of years. And so you've seen that in your investment earnings. And so we're going to talk about how important fund balance is here in a couple pages. But one of the reasons that fund balance is so important is that the money you've got in the bank as a town is generating revenue for you as a town. And as we've all kind of dealt with inflation, which is the other side of the equation in the last several years, one of the great ways to counteract the inflationary pressures on expenditures is to make sure you're maximizing interest earnings and investment earnings to the extent you're able. And so having those fund balances and maximizing the earnings on them is a great way to help offset some of those inflationary pressures. So we'll flip to the other side of the coin, if you will, in terms of the expenditures for the general fund. First thing we'll point out here, on average, if you looked at all of them in the general fund, they're certainly not even each and every year. It's been an unusual couple of years with COVID, so forth and so on. But they've been growing on average about 12% a year. You would expect that with a growing town. You've got additional needs, so forth and so on, to make sure you keep up with that growth. But importantly, that 12.4% in terms of expenditure growth is less than the growth in your revenues. Your revenue's been growing about 15+% on average. Expenditures have been growing about 12+%. So you as a town have been managing the budget, managing the revenues and expenditures very well, very responsibly over the last 5 or so years. We'll flip over to page 10. And on page 10, just to give you a snapshot of if we take the revenues versus the expenditures. So what does our bottom line look like, revenue versus expenditure? What you see in the numbers here, take your eye to the net change in fund balance. That's sort of the bottom line if you look at general governmental financial statements. Three very positive years in 19, 20, and 21. 21 actually put about $1 million in the good, so to speak. As you get to 22, there is a negative there, but there's a very important caveat there. We don't view that per se as a negative because that negative $750,000 was really because you were able to basically save up some money those first 3 years there and then reinvest it in capital projects in that 2021 time period. So we want to make sure we make that caveat in that we don't view that negatively, because what you're really doing during that time period is putting some dollars away, saving it, and then investing it in capital projects versus investing it in sort of recurring operational expenditures. We saw a similar thing in 2023, but in 2023 even you're able to add just a little smidge to the bottom line and still make some very healthy cash-funded capital expenditures. So that's important. The back of the book, we're going to talk about your capacity to borrow for large generational capital projects. We also want to make sure you've got the balance and the wherewithal to fund a lot of the day-to-day types of capital projects and not have to borrow for them. And so have a good, healthy mixture of cash funding and borrowing for hopefully the bigger stuff, which as we think about a police station, as you think about park project, those are going to be long, generational, multiple decade kind of useful life things. Those are good things to borrow for. And you also have the capacity to be cash funding some of the smaller items they may not want to go out and borrow for. No different than in your personal finances. If you maybe want to redo a kitchen or a bathroom or add an addition, it might be good to borrow for something like that versus if you need to repair the roof for the air conditioning, better to pay cash for that. So a little bit of a personal finance corollary. On page 11, this is just a little bit more detail, but it gives you some more breakout around how in fiscal year 2023, as we looked at the revenues versus the expenditures, you're able to basically take about $1.7 million, I'm rounding up a little bit, about $1.7 million of cash-funded capital and still in the bottom line have a nice little positive. And so I'll just give you some additional detail there on page 11. So as we keep moving over to the general fund balance, so we've got a number of bars here looking back the last 5 years. This is really, at the end of the day, for a local government, whether you're a city or a county or a town like you, this is your savings account. What do you have at the end of the day in the event of an emergency to make sure you can cash flow your day-to-day operations, and what do you have saved up for cash-funded capital, so forth and so on. So what we see, which lines up with the prior couple pages, is a very, very nice growth in that fund balance between 2019 and 2021. And then as you get to 22 and 23, purposely and pre-planned spending some of those dollars you had saved, which is okay to the extent it's pre-planned, it's known for capital projects, and you're in compliance with your financial policy, which you are, and we'll show you in the next page or thereabouts. So good, healthy trend there. If we can scroll just to the bottom of this page, there's one other thing, actually two things I'll point out here. The unassigned fund balance. So there's a whole bunch of different classifications and categories of fund balance in your audit. We would argue that the most important of those is the unassigned fund balance. Sometimes people will call that the rainy day fund. So to the extent there is an emergency, there's a bad storm, there's a problem, something like that, there's unbudgeted expenditures that always tend to come up if there's an emergency type of situation. That's part of why that unassigned fund balance is there. It's also there for possible positive reasons. So you're a growing town to the extent there's an economic development project, something you want to partner with private industry on for economic development purposes, that's another good place to be thinking about in terms of that unassigned fund balance. So we tend to watch that very closely year over year. And when you look at 2019 to 2023, you're up about $500,000 using rough math there. And so it's a good positive trend. So we go to the next page, And as I mentioned, the town has, and you have for a number of years, have a financial policy around that unassigned fund balance. That's very typical for any well-run local government to have a policy like this, and you see what yours is in the middle of the page there. So yours basically says you want to have at least 50% of the annual budget in that unassigned fund balance as it's reported at the end of the year in the audit. Doesn't have to be there on a day-to-day basis, but as you get to your audit, end of the year, you want to have at least that 50% ratio in the unassigned fund balance. If we scroll down just a smidge here, that policy level is in the red dashed lines. Where you actually have been is in the green. And so you can see that in 2019, 2020, 2021, you were as high as 130%, which is a good thing. Higher number, better here. And then use some of those dollars to invest in capital in a planned way. And so you're at about 72% in 2022, about 65% in 2023. So we're getting closer to that 50% policy, but still very much in compliance with it. So that's something that as you work through, obviously, your 24 audit, you're well into 2025, we'll continue to watch that. As your budget grows, the amount of dollars that need to be in that fund balance to maintain that 50% will also grow. So that's one thing we'll make sure we point out, especially in a growing local government. The policy is purposely pegged or targeted to be a percentage of the budget because your budget's going to continue to grow, and so your needs will continue to grow. So you want to make sure that reserve is sized appropriate to the size of the overall operation. But right now you're in very good shape there. Next couple pages, we'll just compare how you stand in terms of that fund balance, knowing it's so important to those peers that we showed you towards the beginning of the presentation here. So we, the town of Andrew, at the top there in the kind of dark green bar, all the peers are, it's a little bit lighter green on the screen there. And so this is showing just pure dollars in the total general fund and unassigned. So look at the right-hand side, we're below the peer median. But again, we've got the Sandsfords and the Claytons and the Smithfield that are much larger. So if we flip the page, let's go to the next one there, and we look at that unassigned fund balance adjusted for the size of each of the various jurisdictions' budgets, which is that right-hand side graph there. Unassigned fund balance is a percent of the expenditures, so adjusted again for the size of local government. You are right on, if not a little bit above, the median. And so what that's really telling us is that you have a very strong fund balance, you're in good shape, but you're not out of line with where other of your peers in the area are. That peer median is a little bit below 60%, you're a little bit above 60%, so plus or minus, you are right on top of the peer median. You'll see a big divergence between the top and the bottom, but if you maybe kind of ignore for the moment, throw out the high and low, Benson being the low, Irwin being the high, you're really right in the middle of the pack there in terms of other, growing in the area towns, and so gives us, again, a window as to how you're doing relative to others. You're very much in line with how other local governments are operating, which is a good thing. As we get to the next page, we'll talk a little bit about assessed value. You are growing so much, both in terms of just new development and in terms of reval, meaning reassessment of existing properties. We just wanted to show this because it's so important to your overall revenue generation. If we can scroll down just a little bit more, you see on the left-hand side a graph there of your total assessed values, basically the total tax base in the town. Was a nice steady increase over the last 10 years, and then you got to 2023. The first reval, that was in Harnett, and so you saw that impact in addition to the growth in your total tax base goes from about 400 million to about 590 million. So that was your first big jump. Your second big jump is actually at the top of the page. We didn't quite have it on the graph, But as you factor in further growth plus the Wake County reval or reassessment, your total tax base now is about $870 million. So you've seen a very substantial growth in that underlying tax base over the last couple of years. What we'll say is that it's a great positive for you. So financially, that's a big help. Because on the backside of that, we know that you'll have, and it's just the nature of being a growing town, you're going to have more needs as the population grows. So the capital side of things, police stations, parks, so forth, we'll talk about those, but it's just the nature of a growing town. We're also going to have some of those operational needs. Obviously up to you and the board with your management to determine what those are, but that's just the practical reality of being a growing town, is that while your tax base is growing, you also know those needs will also grow. And so just managing and balancing that year over year is the challenge, but something you've done a very good job of the last several years. So in terms of observations, recommendations, just a couple for you here. General fund has been in very good shape, so I won't belabor this, but so much, I think, maintaining that compliance to your fund balance policy. If there's one thing you want to take away from this, just watching that year over year is very, very important. And clearly watching year over year budget to make sure you're structurally balanced, whereby recurring revenues are covering recurring expenditures, which is the situation you're in right now. Maintaining that is really also a key to success. So as we keep moving, we'll do a little bit here on existing outstanding debt. I mentioned at the outset, this is not water and sewer. That's separate and self-supporting. So this is just the tax supported, we call that, supported by the general fund. You start right now with a very nominal, very, very small amount of outstanding debt. It's about $170,000. It's very tiny on the graph. And so basically you are in a good position to be thinking about some of the large capital investments that you're contemplating right now. As we flip the page, so we're going to cover towards the back half of this presentation really two concepts. One is debt capacity, what we call debt capacity. One is debt affordability. So debt capacity is really how do we make sure that we are in good stead, so to speak, with lenders, with the state and the LGC, with rating agencies. If we get to that point, that's really measured via some policies we'd recommend you put in place. That's debt capacity. Debt affordability is arguably the more important of the two. That is, if we do go borrow some dollars, how are we going to pay for it? And so we're going to touch both of those topics in here because they're both important. If you'd argue one is more important than another, the ability to pay for it is arguably more important. We want to keep both of them in mind as we do the various planning going forward. So on page 21, there's a couple policies that as you work over the wintertime, work through probably your 26 budget cycle, would recommend you consider putting in place. These have been consistent last couple of years, and now you're really getting to the point of likely moving forward on borrowing for the police station. So those policies here in the middle of the page, debt to assessed value and debt service to expenditures. These are two commonly used policies. They're a ratio, really, that measures how much outstanding debt do we have, in the first case, relative to our total tax base, in the second case, relative to our annual budget. And so we'll show you a couple of recommendations. If we can just flip the page to 22. So the first of the two policies, debt service to expenditures. Another way to think about this policy is how many pennies out of every dollar in the budget are going to make a debt service payment. Right now you have a very, very nominal, tiny little amount. So small that as you look at that graph on the left-hand side, you can hardly kind of make out that dark green bar. That's not a mistake. It's just because we have a very small amount of debt outstanding. What we've put on that top left graph, and this is consistent, would be consistent with your peers, is a range of maximums in terms of if we go forward and do a series of projects, police station, et cetera, let's make sure that we don't go above a couple limiters in terms of the pennies out of every dollar in the budget going to make a debt service payment. And so anywhere in the 12 to 15%, that yellow dotted line is at 12%, the red is at 15%, anywhere in that range is viewed as being best practices, responsible, so forth and so on. Doesn't mean you have to go all the way up to that level, but those are good governors and good guidelines, also knowing that you're a growing town that's going to have a variety of needs to take on. You can see where you compare to peers. They're anywhere, between the 5 to 10% range. But again, a lot of this is sort of generational. Where are you in the capital investment cycle? If you need to take on a big project like a police station, like a park, so forth, so on, you're going to be towards the high end of that cycle. So as we flip the page, the other policy and ratio is the debt to assessed value. This is really measuring how much total outstanding tax-supported debt relative to the total tax base. Anywhere in the 2.5 to 3.5% range would be viewed as responsible. Given how much your tax base is growing, we could probably err on the lower side of that as a good governor. And again, both of these would be designed to be maximums. Doesn't mean you need to go all the way up to them. But kind of a red line, we don't really want to go above that as a policy. It helps with the planning, helps to be able to demonstrate when we go out and do borrow money for lenders that we've got policies that govern to make sure we don't get over-leveraged in terms of the tax base. So on page 24, just to kind of wrap that section up, your unassigned fund balance, you're in compliance with that. No recommended changes there. You're in good shape. That is serving you well. And again, bottom of the page here, as you work through the wintertime, work through your 26 budget process, recommend that you go ahead and put these in place, and that'll tie in well with moving forward with the police station and other potential projects. Let's see, page 25, I think we can just move right past, and we'll go to page 27. So 27, I think the last section we have in here, we call it capital funding analysis. This is really looking on a going forward basis. So we'll take the police station, we'll take a potential park project, we'll layer both of those things in and measure how does that look relative to our debt capacity, those ratios we just talked about, and what does it look like in terms of our affordability, i.e. how do we actually pay for these things if you as a town continue moving forward with them. So the two assumptions we've used in here, again, knowing that we've been in this inflationary environment and trying to take all those things into account. The police station project, we've got $8.14 million is the total borrowing amount right now in terms of the budget. Been going back and forth with Elizabeth and USDA, and some of the construction side of things have come in. We'll show you what that looks like in the next couple pages. I'll tell you right now, it fits within your capacity. It also fits within your affordability, just to kind of give you that sense. That project expected to be paid for, borrowed via this USDA loan program. It's a long process to kind of get up and going with the USDA folks. It just is what it is. But the advantage of it is a very good interest rate. And so as you look in the middle of the page here, the permanent loan is expected to be 3 5/8, 3.875, which relative to the current market is below current market. So there's an advantage to that federal program by virtue of that. You also get the ability to repay it over 30 years. So it's a little bit longer than the state usually lets us, and it's prepayable anytime with no penalty. And so there's an interest rate advantage, there's an amortization advantage, and as you continue to grow as a town and develop, to the extent you get a couple years into this, maybe it's 5, 10 years, and say, you know what, there's a economic reason we might want to pay this off early, you could do that with no penalty. And so it's a very advantageous program once you get it up and going. The process to get there does take a while. That's just the nature of the beast, so to speak, in terms of working with any of these federal programs. But we've got the latest, I think, assumptions built in here. Importantly, also the way this program works is that we as a town would need to go get interim financing, kind of like a construction loan. If you build a house, we need to go get interim financing first. That interim financing is in place during the construction time period. At the end of construction, the permanent USDA loan kicks in. We would know, you would know the exact terms of that USDA loan before you enter into all of that, but that just timing-wise and structure is the way that works. So really, over the course of probably about the next 6 months or thereabouts, we'd be looking to go out and get an interim bank loan. We need to work through the LGC. We'd bid that out competitively to banking institutions. That would get construction going, and then construction would occur over that probably 18-month time period. At the end of construction, the permanent USDA loan kicks in. And so we've got that timing built into the cash flows in there, and that's very typical for one of these types of projects. The second project we've built into this planning is a new park project. The number we're using right now for the borrowing amount is $5.1 million. We understand $6 million is maybe the discussed number, the planning number for purposes of the project. But owing to the prior conversation, you've been smart as a town and put away some dollars to be able to cash fund a portion of that. So the borrowing amount for planning purposes right now is about $5.1 million. We've got a couple different scenarios on that because the expectation is we're not going to go through that federal program. We'll go out and do some more traditional bank financing for that park project. So we have some conservative assumptions built in here for the park financing, a 5% interest rate, which is above the current market on purpose. Just want to build a little bit of conservatism in there. And we've run that assuming either a 20-year repayment in the first scenario or a 15-year repayment in the second scenario. So just a couple different layers of different options and ways to look at it. But again, the idea being let's plan more conservatively, knowing that rates right now are currently lower, but we don't control that, you don't control that, so we just want to make sure we've got some level of contingency built in there. So I think as we go to the next page, so as we talk about the assumptions built into all of this, and this really gets to that debt affordability concept, which is very, very important. All right, if we're going to do these things, and that's really up to the mayor and the board, obviously, but if we're going to do these things, how are we going to repay the debt service? No different than if you're going to buy a house or renovate a house, you need to make sure you can pay for the mortgage. And so what you've done as a town, which is very, very positive, is you've been able to do that annual cash funding of one-time projects. That's allowed you to not have to borrow for them, and it's given you a built-in revenue source such that as you roll into the FY26 budget process, you've already got dollars built into the budget to allocate and kind of switch over to begin making debt service payments. So as we look at all of this, looking at your 25 budget and thinking towards 2026, the question is, okay, how are we going to make these debt service payments? You really got that built into the 25 budget right now. If you roll some of these things we'll talk about here into debt service going forward, there's really no need to come up with additional dollars over and above what you have in the budget right now. Doesn't mean you won't need additional dollars for other projects and other priorities and things of that variety, but you think about these series of projects, you've really got within your existing wherewithal the financial capacity to take those on. And so you see that in the middle of the page. What we're really talking about is your existing debt service is about $38,000. Very small amount. We've talked about that. There's not a whole lot there. But by virtue of the last several years of budget planning, you've got $200,000 already programmed in there for the police station. As we understand it, the Campbell Street Sidewalk Project, some dollars for a new comprehensive plan. If you really think about taking those that are already in the budget and rolling those into a debt service payment, what that gets you at the bottom of the page is about $950,000 already in the budget that can be used towards debt service. That $950,000, as we'll show you in the next couple of pages, basically takes care of the police station, and the vast majority of the park. And so we'll show you what that looks like in the next couple pages. Okay, if we scroll down a little bit, there's a lot of numbers on this page, and I'll try to walk you through relatively quickly. But this is really the more detailed cash flows, if you will, around how all that works. So I won't go number by number here, but basically you work left to right. Your existing debt services in column A, that's a very small amount of debt you have outstanding right now. Column B, the USDA interim financings. We talked about that construction loan during the interim financing process. Those are the payments that we've estimated right now would be for that interim construction loan. Column C is when that permanent USDA loan kicks in. Those are what those payments look like. The park project, again, using some estimates. This is a 20-year option or 20-year sort of scenario. That's in column D. You add all those up, and you get to column E. So all column E is doing is adding all the various columns up before it and getting to a total. If you then compare that to what's in column G, which is at $950,000 or thereabouts, if I round it to $1 million for ease of discussion, but in that range, what you see is that you basically have the dollars allocated, the wherewithal within the 25 budget to take care of the debt service payments on those various projects, and not just in one year, on a sustainable, recurring, annual basis. As you look at column H, that's the additional revenue required, very simple math, that's just comparing column F and column G. You do see some relatively nominal dollars there in the intervening years. Those don't give us much pause, knowing that we've used conservative assumptions in terms of interest rates, also knowing that you're growing as a town, also knowing that you've got very strong fund balances. So those relatively nominal dollars there in column H don't give us much particular pause. This looks to be a sustainable path as you look at these various projects. So as we'll flip the next couple pages, so that's the affordability component. This just gives you a graphical sense of what that looks like in terms of the debt service. One important point I'll make here is that the USDA loan and their requirements are a little bit different than a bank loan that maybe would go through the local government commission, and so you see a little bit different structure there. The USDA loan is in those gold bars. You see a level annual payment, kind of like your mortgage. Every single year it's got the same amount. What the local government commission really likes for local governments in North Carolina to do is repay with level principal, which basically results in those blue bars, and so that's the way we'd be thinking about the park project. And so you add those two together, what that gets you to is a nice level annual payment for the police station, and then to the extent the park moves forward, you'd have a little bit more of a hill decline, but again, we already talked about that's already in the budget. And the nice part about it is there's a natural decline by virtue of that structure. So as you think about the continuum of the town, the need to continually make reinvestment, it builds capacity kind of automatically in your debt profile by virtue of having that downward slope once you get to that time period. So we'll flip next couple pages here. This again is all that affordability concept. This is the debt capacity concept. So we talked about those ratios, those policies, those things we'd recommend you put in place. This is basically layering in all of the various between the police station and the parks. Where do we stack up? We layer all those things in. That ratio goes to a little bit above 10%, but then falls back down and is below that 12 to 15% policy range. As you flip to the page, yep, keep going there. This is that other ratio, debt to assessed value. Again, the growth in your underlying tax base is so substantial that as you layer these in, even relative to a 2.5% policy, which is a good, responsible level to have that policy, you've got good capacity relative to it. And so this, again, is a positive situation relative to that. So the last couple slides will show you and then I'll stop talking and answer any questions you have. It's just another way to look at the park project. So everything here related to the police station is exactly the same. This scenario just takes the park and instead of repaying it over 20 years, repays the park over 15 years. No different than a home mortgage. If maybe you've gone and gotten a 20-year mortgage versus a 30-year mortgage, the advantage is that you pay the mortgage off faster, you pay less interest over time. The counterbalance to that is your payment is higher. And so no different here, a 15-year loan for the park project versus a 20, the total payments over the life of the loan will be less than a 20-year. But the corollary there is we need to have a little bit more dollars in the budget in order to make that happen. So we've highlighted that here in the column H in that gold box, whereby with a 15-year loan, which I think is what the local government commission would really like for you to do and be thinking about if you move forward with this, probably more on this scenario. FY26 in good shape. As we get to FY27, maybe in the range of $120, $150, $60,000 for a couple of years before that tails back off. Additional that we need to identify. But again, it starts at about 120 and starts to fall off. And a way we can sort of solve for that is by using some of that fund balance in a very targeted way, putting some of that aside up front and helping to make those payments during that several-year time period in column H. It's really a way to kind of combine a couple different things, pay the loan off a little bit quicker, use some of our fund balance to make sure we can cover that without harming our ability to cover other operations and expenditures along the way. I think we can go quickly over this page. Exact same picture, just park repaid over 15 years instead of 20. That's the dark blue there. And if we flip to the next page, again, still in compliance with the 12% policy. We're a little bit closer just because we're paying that park off quicker, and so your payment is a little bit higher than under a 20-year option. But again, that falls off relatively quickly as you get into that loan and making annual principal payments. The loan balance also shrinks much quicker. And we flip one more page. Similar picture, if you will, in terms of debt to assessed value. You'd be in fine shape with this policy and this ratio. So I think on our last page, and then I'll stop and certainly answer any questions, clarify anything. I think just one more page in terms of next steps. Where we're really headed, obviously subject to the mayor and board's discretion and input, is working with the USDA folks to kind of finalize things, clarify things. On the finance side of things, I think we're pretty close to that. Finish that up during the month of December, and then work towards what's called a letter of conditions with the USDA, probably sometime in the early part of the calendar year. It's kind of up to their timing, but it seems like we're getting close there. And then as you work through the wintertime, developing the 26 budget, you make sure we get the planning associated with that and really work towards probably the springtime with the contractor side, which is not our world, more obviously Elizabeth and Jimmy's world, but tying that together with an LGC process, application to them, bidding of that construction loan, so forth and so on. That probably happens during the springtime. And so I'll stop and pause there. Appreciate the time, a lot of information in a short time period, and answer any questions or clarify anything that I can.
Any questions?
I have one. I know we talked briefly a couple months ago about a future project that we committed to for $15 million for the wastewater treatment capacity for Harnett County. By looking at this, if we had to borrow, we're sitting pretty good.
Yeah, I think what's critical there is if it's for water and sewer, as long as that water and sewer fund is fully self-supporting, that's the critical component as we look at this particular analysis.
Okay.
Yeah, this analysis is only for Fund 10. And so
I know. I just wanted it on the record because I've had people that looked at the agenda, and so I wanted for him to explain it.
So the 15.4 million for the wastewater treatment plant. We have approximately $11 million in ARPA funds
Right.
that are going to be going towards that. So we're not having to come up with the full 15.4.
Right. That's why I wanted it on the record. Thank you.
Back in the beginning, you mentioned some of the towns are accredited. What is the process to get accredited, and what advantage does it have?
Great question. So the process is really, we as a town would go approach, there's 3 rating agencies, Moody's, Standard & Poor's, and Fitch, and we as a town could approach them and say, hey, we would like to have a credit rating. Most people will approach probably at least 2 of them. And it's really, it's your discretion. And you would go show them, we'd put a whole package together, what they care about in terms of credit ratings. You can kind of boil down into like 4 topic areas. They care about the economy, management, finances, and debt. And so we'd put a variety of those things together, proactively go to them at your collective discretion, and they can then go through a process to give us a credit rating, again, if it's needed. I think the answer to your second question in terms of what's the advantage is typically when you get to a point whereby you are borrowing for things that USDA is not able to provide, because USDA doesn't require a credit rating, when you need to borrow for things that maybe bank financing can't provide. So as you think about the park project, that's still in a size at roughly $5-6 million that competitively bid bank financing can provide, and that doesn't require a credit rating either. And so typically, when the size of your capital projects gets large enough that you need to go borrow in the public credit markets, you need to put together an offering document and sell securities into the public credit markets. That's typically when you'll go get a credit rating. That's what the ratings, that's what the credit markets really require in terms of being able to go sell bonds in the credit markets at the lowest possible cost of funds. And so as you would look around, Harnett's got great credit ratings, Johnston has excellent credit ratings, Wake County's got excellent credit ratings, and just the scale of a county like that, they're borrowing for schools, they're borrowing for larger projects. A lot of that happens in the public credit markets versus many towns. If you're borrowing for things that are $5, $6, $7, $8, $9, $10 million, it's substantial clearly for the town, but it can be done in ways that doesn't necessarily require yet a credit rating. There's a cost to a credit rating too, so there's a cost benefit there. So if we wanted to go get that, there was a cost associated with it, and we want to make sure it was worth that cost in terms of going through that process.
Any other questions? Well, thank you very much for coming up to present this to us tonight. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Appreciate the time.
Thank you.
All right, we have one more presentation from Withers Ravenel. Speak to us about our comprehensive use plan.
Mayor, before Greg gets up here to give his presentation, I just want to say that Greg Feldman with Withers and Ravenel is our project manager, and he's going to go over our kickoff session that we had a couple of weeks ago and talk about next steps. And if you have any questions for Greg or myself, we'll be happy to answer those. But Greg, it's all yours.
Thank you very much. Good evening, Mayor, members of the board. Great to see you all. Hope you had a wonderful holiday and are looking forward to the one right around the corner. Sounds like quite a few events in between now and then to enjoy. But great to see you all again. As Jeff mentioned, the purpose of tonight's presentation will be to share what might not all be new information with some of you, but certainly with those in the audience. We're going to talk a little bit about the project team, so some of the faces that you all will see throughout this process. That'll span approximately 13 months, so we're talking about a process that wraps up in about a year's time from today. And we'll talk a little bit about what a comprehensive plan is, again, what it can and can't do, how it's intended to be used, and its purpose as a useful guiding document and a tool for decision making. We'll wrap up with a few exercises that'll be geared towards potentially naming the comprehensive plan. so that folks will have an association with the name. Not that the Andrew Comprehensive Plan doesn't have a special ring to it, but we will present a few names that myself and staff have discussed, and we'll also transition from that into an exercise on potentially establishing, or at least starting the conversation on establishing a study area for the plan. We'll wrap up, again, as Jeff mentioned, with next steps and key milestones in the project. To introduce the project team from the Withers Ravenel side, again, my name is Greg Feldman. I'm a project manager and planner, community planner by trade with Withers Ravenel. Again, my background prior to joining Withers Ravenel approximately 2 years ago is completely within local government. So I worked completely within a community planning department as both a current and long-range planner. So I certainly understand the day-to-day that Jeff and his team face with the growing community. Daniel Rao is a senior planner with our team. Daniel really specializes in the parks and recreation space as well as transportation. So any items that come up throughout this process relating to those two areas, he'll certainly be our expert to call on. Mr. Adam Culpepper is a planner and a policy expert, so expert on all things law and legislation. So inevitably throughout a comprehensive plan update, it's not uncommon for potential recommendations to be geared towards policy updates, ordinance updates more specifically. So when we're talking about potentially updating the town's ordinance through a recommendation via the comp plan and recommendations that stem from it, Adam will be who we call on. I'd be remiss not to mention Mr. John Mills, who I know you all are familiar with the concurrent sewer basin or lift command model analysis that's running concurrently with this effort. So very excited or to share with you all, rather, that John has begun the data transferring conversation with the town's public works department. So getting lift station data already transmitted over to his team so that we can begin the process to fully and clearly find out how we'll have those two efforts overlap specifically with the future land use map that'll be a result of this comprehensive plan, and how certain areas with respect to land use designations can correlate with what's found throughout that analysis based on potential areas for sewer capacity. And we can probably skip over this slide. It's really intended just to, again, state that the behind-the-scenes Withers Ravenel team, we are a multidisciplinary firm, meaning we have a deep bench. So inevitably, issues or concerns that come up with stormwater, transportation, we have experts within our firm that we can call on that will serve as subject matter experts. So what is a comprehensive plan? Again, it is a shared community vision for the future. So thinking in terms of 2 decades out, where is Andrew? What will Andrew look like? So it is a shared community vision for the future that encompasses all of these various elements ranging from demographics, infrastructure, and utilities, as we mentioned with the concurrent sewer basin analysis. Certainly the natural environment, recreation, open spaces, land use. Of course, we'll talk about existing land use throughout this process as well as future land use. Housing needs, housing patterns, growth patterns, community services and facilities, as well as community character. And I'll stick on that slide for just a second, but what a comprehensive plan can do is it certainly helps staff and leadership prioritize community goals, which I think is a perfect segue from the financial feasibility report presentation that was just shared with you all. But it's certainly a tool that can help prioritize different action items that are come as a result of this effort. It's required by law, by North Carolina law, to enforce zoning. So if you want to continue to enforce zoning in the town, you certainly have to have an up-to-date comprehensive plan, but it is not regulatory. It is required that throughout decision-making that it is referred to. So that means that you are certainly taking into account what the comprehensive plan does say may be appropriate in certain areas, as well as the policies that come out of the comprehensive plan. But it really is intended to serve as a guiding document and tool for you all as elected officials throughout decision-making, such as a case of a rezoning is the best example. And we can jump ahead to the next slide. This is the conceptual process. I will be brief here because the following slide does share a detailed project schedule that you all would have had in your packets. But essentially, we're here. We're at the beginning of the process. Same place, essentially, we were just 2 weeks ago at the community kickoff. We're very much so still in the data gathering and prior planning efforts review stage. That step of the process is really intended to span up until the early part of next year. So right around the middle of January, we will start to transition into our next visioning and goals stop in the process, which will include rather a community survey that'll help us kind of understand where the community sits with respect to its priority list. We'll then present all those findings from our results of the community survey and another engagement event so that we can start forming a vision for the next 2 decades that will guide this plan and the goals that stem from it. And then we'll go to the drawing board. We'll start drafting the plan that will eventually roll out, of course, at a public meeting with review. And essentially that brings us to this time next year where we'll present the full plan in draft form, but that is very conceptual. This next slide that we'll talk through for just a minute, if we can jump over to it. It's probably easier to make it out in front of you if you do have this in your packet, but what may look different on this schedule now than from the last time some of you all got the chance to look at it is that those date and month placeholders are filled in. So I encourage you all to mark off your calendars as you're able. We'll certainly post this on the project webpage on the town's website so that folks can also mark their calendars and be sure to come out when we do schedule events. The only 2 placeholders left on this schedule will be our public meetings that'll follow tonight. The reason behind why those are not filled in yet is because it's my understanding after talking with Jeff and his staff that the event calendar for next year is still being finalized. So we want to make sure that we're leveraging community events so that we can meet people where they are, where they're most comfortable to share their opinions with us. We certainly feel that that's the best way to engage throughout this process. But again, at a decently high level, we're in the project initiation and analysis step of this 3-step process. We'll transition around early next year, middle of January, beginning of February into the visioning and plan development. That'll include that community survey that I mentioned. We'll also meet with our project steering committee, which again, it's great to see some of our steering committee members here tonight. We'll meet with our steering committee throughout the process. Their goal really is to serve as a project champion. So they're our sounding board. Any information that we find throughout this process based on community feedback, we'll vet with the steering committee and just make sure that we're presenting it in the way given their pulse on the community. We'll also, within that visioning and plan development process, or step rather, we'll draft that future land use map. Depending on what we do find from community survey results that are geared towards preferred land use in what areas of the town. That'll also be, again, intertwined with that LIFT command, that sewer basin analysis. So where may higher density be more appropriate? Where may low density residential growth be more appropriate? Commercial, industrial, and so forth. All the various flavors of land use. That draft future land use map step will take place in that visioning and plan development stop. We'll also roll into draft plan recommendations that'll be very specific recommendations based on the visioning and goals steps in this process. So those recommendations will all be associated with a clear roadmap on how to achieve them, along with an associated time frame for implementation. That'll lead us into the last step, which is essentially refinement and adoption. It's a checkpoint, a final checkpoint in the process to make sure that we did get everything right. What do we need to tweak before this document is adopted and used as a tool by the town? So I think we'll jump from there. This is an image, a scanned image of a board that may be familiar to some of you all, but it reads simply, and this was displayed at our November 19th kickoff right here in this room. This is one of our interactive stations. It reads, what's your vision for Anger? So where do you see the town in the next 20 years? What do you want to see in the town over the next 20 years? And without everyone squinting and trying to make out this information on this board, I'll summarize it briefly and plainly that there's an underlying theme of wanting to attract some of that non-residential commercial growth. This is a really preliminary finding, but there is a need to have a sense of live, work, and play within the community itself to accommodate for some of the new rooftops that have come online in the recent years. So having folks be able to stay, shop, play, and eat within the town without going to neighboring municipalities. That was a key theme and takeaway from this board, as you'll see through several of the comments if you look back through the presentation at this slide. So looking forward certainly to many more engagement events throughout this process where we'll have interactive boards like this. I always get a lot of enjoyment out of them, and I think they're a great way for folks to participate and share their thoughts on the future. And so from here, I think we'll jump into our first exercise, which will be the plan study area. Now, I'll preface with the intent of tonight is not necessarily to have a decision. I know I did talk about this briefly with the steering committee as well as various town department heads at our kickoff event on November 19th. But essentially, why do we want to start this or have this study area conversation? Identifying a study area, and I'll read from our slide here, beyond the existing limits of the town does allow the team to account for additional spatial factors. So essentially what that means is that you're not confined to just the town's corporate limits or extraterritorial jurisdiction when thinking about appropriate future land use. So this conversation may be familiar to some of you all. But what I mean is you'll see the pattern of Anger looking north right on that brown color, which we don't have a legend showed it. It's a little cut off on this slide, but that brown color is all the annexation agreement with the town of Fuquay Arena. So that's kind of your limits north, right? But you can see you have corporate limits via annexation north of the ETJ in Wake County and split between Wake and Harnett counties there. So the purpose of thinking about future land use beyond where the town's current planning jurisdiction extends, the benefit is, well, when you do have another satellite annexation, perhaps, that are outside of the town's corporate limits, but still within the legal parameters, you'll have a designated land use that's appropriate in that area. So there will be already an idea. The town's already considered what might be appropriate outside of its planning jurisdiction today. So there is certainly a benefit to it. I'll leave you all with, and we can certainly talk through it. I'll take a moment to pause so we can talk through this exercise. But one indicator that in recent years some communities have looked to is the North Carolina legislation that does restrict a community of the size of the town to only be able to satellite annex a property that is within 2 miles of its core corporate limits. So that core corporate limits area would be that lighter gray color in the middle. So one kind of starting point to look at when establishing a study area may be to look at the borders of where that core corporate limits exists and stretch 2 miles outward, because that's essentially as far as you can really extend your jurisdiction at this point in time. So happy to pause there for just a second before we move on to one final exercise and wrap up with next steps. Any questions on or concerns maybe with establishing a study area, or do you have any ideas of your own that you think might be beneficial to talk through? If we can jump back just one slide so we can have that map up. Happy to answer any questions. I'll certainly continue this conversation with Jeff and his team and various town department heads. I also failed to mention that a part of the overall engagement as in this effort will be to interview multiple stakeholders from different professions, certainly some from the development community and other community liaisons. These stakeholders will include the Harnett County Planning Department. Obviously, we know that Harnett County has a great deal of utility infrastructure immediately outside and some within the town's extraterritorial jurisdiction, ETJ. So we will certainly be discussing their future land use map with them in great detail too, which may help guide this conversation on establishing a study area too. So I'll stop there for just a second. Does the board have any questions regarding a study area establishment at this point in time for the plan?
The 210 corridor between here and Lillington has become a hot commodity, and so that's certainly something we've staked a metaphorical flag out there at our 2 mile limit, and so definitely that corridor, but as well 55 going out of town towards Coates would definitely be somewhere I would be in favor of us, thinking outside the box, because we are, like you said, growing all which ways. So,
well, I think you certainly sparked an idea in my head that may be a beneficial exercise at our next checkpoint with the project steering committee and with the community, maybe to just show what that 2 mile bubble looks like. Probably would have been a great idea to have that on the map this evening, but we'll certainly put that 2 mile bubble on there so everyone gets a clear understanding of what that might look like.
Yeah. I'll just point out for those who haven't seen this map before that the light gray is current town limits, dark gray is current ETJ. correct?
Correct.
And then the brown on top is going to be Fuquay, and we can go right up to that. You can see the bypass is a red dashed line, so if anyone comes back to the map on their own time, it's a great tool.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's certainly the purpose behind putting that annexation agreement, because that's essentially the limits Fuquay can stretch south, and those are the limits you all can stretch north, right? Okay, well, we will, I think we have clear direction on what we'll do for next steps on the study area conversation. In just one slide back, I'm sorry, I did say next steps, I apologize for that. In naming the plan, this is intended to be a fun exercise. It's again, not reliant on a decision tonight, but these are just 5 ideas that staff and our team at Withers Ravenel have discussed. Again, the purpose of establishing a plan name at this point in the process is to have some familiarization with the community, some association with what the effort is. Not that, again, the comprehensive plan isn't a fine name, but all of these names, as you'll note, do look 20 years into the future. That's the time frame intended for this plan. And all of them have an underlying theme of forward thinking, looking ahead, understanding that there's growth, but keeping a forward thinking mindset. I'll just ask the board here, do any of these kind of jump off the page? We don't have to have a consensus this evening, but I did want it to be a fun exercise that we can maybe talk through for just a minute.
I like planning with purpose.
Okay,
Short.
I like it as well. Any other thoughts? Happy to run with the plan name. I think it will be beneficial to go ahead and get one set in stone sooner than later. A few with alliteration sprinkled in. I think that's a common theme these days, but I too like planning with a purpose, but I'm staying out of the plan name conversation. Well, again, this is not something we need to decide on. If we wanted to take an informal vote on the plan name, we certainly can, but we can continue this
I
conversation.
don't know. We still have old business for a water tower couple.
Okay, well,
You don't need a
we should have
consensus.
probably tied this right in with that, I think. But
I
that's
see the steering committee has a meeting on the 19th. So will that be fine? Can we finalize that perhaps with the committee?
We certainly can.
Okay.
We absolutely can. And that's a great segue into our last slide, which will be next steps. Because I'm glad you mentioned that. I will be sending out an email to the Plan Steering Committee tomorrow morning with an overview and agenda for that meeting that'll actually be pushed up. I understand there's a conflict on the 19th, so we'll actually push that up to Wednesday, the 18th. I'll send all this information out in an email to the steering committee. But that will be our next big milestone in the process. So at that meeting, the steering committee will be discussing some of the questions and intent behind them of that community survey that I referenced earlier on in the presentation. So we'll run through with the committee each of those draft community survey questions to just kind of vet those and tweak and refine them before we roll those out between January the 6th and February 5th. So it's about a 30-day window that'll be well advertised and promoted throughout the community. But those will be our next steps. We do have additional stakeholder interviews that we'll be scheduling for next week, actually. And I mentioned that Harnett County Planning Department is certainly part of that stakeholder group, as well as some of the development community and other professions within the town. We do have 2 public meetings tentatively scheduled for spring and summer of next year. I know that seems like a far way out, but as we all know, it will certainly be here before we know it. And we'll continue to build momentum and steam throughout the process to well advertise for those. They may shift ahead or back depending on the event calendar that'll be established soon, I understand. So again, we want to leverage some community events for those 2 next engagements. And that is going to be it for my presentation tonight. I appreciate you all letting me come back and share a little bit about the process. I'm excited to share some more of the bones of the plan. I know this is a little bit of an early presentation and just a kickoff and the overall intent behind the effort, but very thankful to share it with you all and happy to answer any questions. I know I'll see you all very soon, but if there are any questions for me, happy to answer them.
Thank you very much.
All
I
right.
appreciate you coming out here.
Thank you all. Great to see you.
There's lots of public input opportunities on this one. We are counting on the public to weigh in. It's not just us 5. We're trying to plan for all of Andrew 20 years out. So please take the opportunity to weigh in. If all 7,000 of them could just weigh in a little bit, that would be fantastic. Yeah. All right, that's it for presentations. You guys need a break, or are you ready to rock and roll? All right, we're going to move forward then. We have public comment. Anyone may speak on any issue. We ask that you limit your comments to 3 minutes, and typically, the board members will not respond to your comments at this time. We'll take it under advisement. Nobody's signed up tonight. Is there anyone who would like to speak at public comment tonight? All right, then we'll move on to old business. Old business number 1. Jimmy, we promised that we are going to pick a color for this water tank tonight, so it doesn't hold anything up.
Good evening, board. Hope everybody is doing well. On the screen here, you've got a photo of our existing water tank there at Candybeck. That's a 250,000 gallon water tank. So tonight before you is looking to choose a color, text, logo, or seal for the new 500,000 gallon water tank located along Junior Road, and considering to repaint, changing the logo on the Kennebec water tank. Tanks are repainted anywhere from 10 to 12 years. The Kennebec tank was installed back in 2018, so it's not due to be repainted until 2028 or 2030 for that. If the board chooses to repaint the Kennebec tank ahead of schedule, it would be an additional cost. The cost could be budgeted into next year's budget. The financial impact to change the colors of the tank to the Kennebec tank and add our town seal to that. That cost will be approximately about $42,500. If you wanted to paint the tank, and again, changing colors, if you want to change colors, whatever we decide to choose on, if you want both tanks to be the same or both to be different, it's your choice. That would be roughly about $37,000, almost $38,000. If you leave the tank colors the same, add the town seal, you're looking at about $35,000. Leave the tank colors the same and leave "This is Andrew" on there. It's around $32,400. And we'll go through here and we'll just show you the different color options that we have. All right, so this is what you currently have now. If you wanted to do this one at the Junior Road tank, this is option number 1 for that. And then option number 2 is you've got a tank white, which is the same color as the Dora Street tank that just got repainted here in the last several months. That's got the town seal on that one. Option number 3, I think that last time we met, you guys weren't too keen on the blue there. So, but that is an option. Some of you asked for a black pedestal with a white bowl. We've got that one. So you can imagine either "This is Andrew" on there or the town seal on both sides. That's another option. That one is the, let's see, I got my colors right. That one is the light blue. Yep, and I think the last one is like a slate gray.
All right, so
those are your
choices.
options.
We have 2 choices to make. What color we're going to paint this one, and whether or not, if we don't match the first, are we going to repaint it? Jim just said he wants to see it pink. I don't know if you heard that or his mic wasn't on.
The fourth cost, the 32.4, to leave the tank colors the same and leave the "This is Andrew" logos, is that just to paint it fresh?
That's correct. Just repainting
Just
it the
repaint
same
it
color it
fresh.
is.
Right.
If you chose to put the Junior Road as,
That's going to be the cost in 28, or is that the cost right now?
that's the cost right now.
And in 2028, the cost would be?
It's figured into the maintenance.
Okay,
So
that's
every
what I
year,
thought.
Every year we have a maintenance contract with them.
Okay.
So they do a washout, and if something happened to the tank, hole in the tank, they would come back and repair that as part of the maintenance agreement that we have with them. It's no additional cost.
Okay.
So,
But we wouldn't, if we decided to leave the Kennebec tank alone, there would not be any cost for us right now.
that is correct.
Right.
That is correct.
All right, guys, you want to weigh in on the color here?
I personally like the black with the town crest.
Yeah, I like plain white, or I like that one with the town seal on.
Yep.
So I could go either way, black base or white base.
Okay, remind me again. We currently have one that's already like the white up there.
So the one
that
that
what
is
you're
a
saying?
solid white is the same color as Doris Street. We just painted it, so it's been painted within the last 6 months. So that would be the tank white, same color as you see at Doris Street.
But that tank will come down with this project.
Yep. Advantages to a lighter color is they reflect the heat. A darker color brings in the heat in. That's why you see gas tanks are white or silver. They reflect the heat, and that's one of the things that we try to keep them as the lighter colors as we can. Well, you've got the pedestal itself, and there's actually a tube inside. So the pedestal is just imagine a straw inside of another straw is kind of what that is. So, but the bulb itself is actually what's holding the water.
And then do we know if the black will stay that good looking for 10 years? 'Cause otherwise,
You start to get
Gets chalky.
even with you could probably see the difference between the Kennebec one. They start over time just to get a little chalky. Yeah, with the white one, you're not going to tell if it starts to get a little chalky. So.
do you guys want to?
But just remember, once you put the new tank up, every 10 to 12 years in your contract, it'll automatically be freshened back up. If you want it freshened back up in 5 years, it will cost you to get it repainted. So, and I think for the two tanks that we have have repainted them just on a regular maintenance schedule for that. So now the one at Jenny Road has not been, the 750 has not been because we knew that we were going to be demoing that one.
I would be more inclined to not spend what I would think is unnecessary money for matching, even though I would want them to match, and change out the logo from This Is Anger to our actual town crest, and perhaps just do the red so that it matches if they want it to be matched. But I just can't really justify spending an additional $40-something thousand
Yeah, I agree.
for a paint color.
I don't know. I would prefer not to touch the Kennebec Tower, at least until it needs to be anyway. I also think that two towers are separate enough that if we like white with the seal, we could do the new one white with the seal. And when Kennebec comes up for its regularly scheduled paint, we could swap that one then to white. That's white. But I also don't. I wouldn't want to spend another 40 grand to make them match right now, and to force them to match if we didn't make the new one match already. You know what I mean?
You want us to scroll back through the colors again? Well, I think you should have them in your packet. Again, that's the one at Kennebec, same colors. All right, that's the solid tank white.
Mm-hmm.
That's the blue. That's the black and white. That's the blue, and then that's the slate gray. That was a slate gray, yes, sir.
Any practical differences between white and light gray?
No, sir.
Okay.
And I think if you go with the town seal on those, you'll have that little bit of red at the top. It'll right, whether you go with a white or a slate gray or the black and white. There again, that's correct. Correct.
It's nice.
It looks,
Yes, I mean I agree. It looks nicer with the red seal. think if you went towards the white or the slate color, for just practical reasons. But hey, it's your choice.
I know.
Um,
Do you guys want to pick the color first and then decide on Kennebec, or? Well, let's do a motion for that one. Everyone feels the same on whether or not we're going to read.
Okay, I make a motion that we just leave Kennebec.
All those in favor, raise your right hand. That's unanimous. Cross
can-
that one.
Yeah,
All right.
all right, we're halfway home.
Now we're going to pick a color for the tank. Go ahead, Jim. Somebody make a motion. I'm not loud.
I think we'd go with the slate gray. With the seal.
Make the motion, Jim.
I make a motion that we do the slate gray, right, with the town seal. At least it's got the red, so it's
Yep.
gonna be popping.
Yeah. Any discussion?
So one thing before you vote on it, okay? We have money in the budget to paint the new tank and put a logo. May not be the seal, all right? So we'll have some money in there. That seal may be an additional cost. I'm working on those costs right now, but that's something I can bring back before you. But it may be minimal because we have money fixed in the budget for a seal or text on there. So, and I'm waiting to get those numbers back. So to give you an example of what we talked about originally, when I got off the phone with Melissa from Caldwell, and she just gave me a rough estimate for the seal. You're looking at 14,000 on either side. But there again, we've got money built in the budget for that, so that will come down. So just want to give you a heads up on that. But I'll have a more solid number at the time.
Okay.
So, but I think I would,
I don't think that's additional. What it costs, period. And if we
Right.
do this Andrew, it has a cost too.
that's
The
correct.
difference between the two, we don't know for sure right now.
That is correct. Yes.
I like this deal anyway, but we have a motion for slate gray with the town. There isn't any more discussion. Then all those in favor, raise your right hand. It's unanimous. All right. Thank you, Jimmy.
All right. Thank you so much.
All right. Old business number 2. Elizabeth, you've got that one. Financial policies.
Good dirt is much either.
Good evening, Board. Thank you. Tonight before you is a comprehensive purchasing policy to guide our department heads when procuring goods and services, and it's written in accordance with North Carolina General Statute. I'll be happy to answer any questions you have on it.
I make a motion that we table this. I think we need to have it at a workshop to discuss it more in depth, this policy before proceeding.
All right, there's a motion to table. All those in favor, raise your right hand. That's unanimous. And we'll table that one. All right. Thank you, Elizabeth.
Yep.
Jeff has number 3. Resolution to fix a date for an annexation.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the board. This one will be quick. At your last board meeting, you directed the town clerk to determine the sufficiency of property along West Church Street to be annexed into town. Town clerk has determined that the property can be annexed into town, so we're asking you all to adopt a resolution to set a public hearing for January.
For January?
January, yes.
All right, any discussion or questions for Jeff? Then I'll entertain a motion.
I make a motion that we go ahead and set that date for January.
All right, to be clear, that would be the January 7th.
Right.
Correct.
All those in favor, please raise your right hand. That's unanimous.
Thank you, board.
Thank you, Jeff. New business, number 1. We are going to set 2025's regular board meeting schedule.
Good evening, Board. Pursuant to North Carolina General Statute 160A71, the Board shall fix a time and place for its regular meetings. Adoption of the schedule does not preclude the Board of Commissioners from calling special or emergency meetings. Staff recommends approval of Resolution R018-2024 as presented.
All right, so the important thing to note for people who don't read this all the time is that largely we are proposing to move to one scheduled monthly meeting at the beginning of the month. Part of the reason for that is, town staff has to prepare an agenda for every meeting that we have. That process takes a long time, and it's got to be done several days ahead of when we have the actual. So at least part of the motivation here is to help town staff do their job and not be constantly preparing agendas for. There are some tentative workshops scheduled in the spring. It's budget season, so we'll probably need to meet more often for that. But even if a meeting is not on this schedule, we could still call our own meeting or add a workshop to this if something arises that simply cannot wait until the next meeting. So we still have that option. Any of you guys have any comments or thoughts on this one?
Is the September 3rd moving to a Wednesday due to Labor Day being that Monday?
Yes.
Okay.
Mayor, the meetings with the asterisks are intended to be budget workshops and then May 20th budget presentation to the board.
Okay. If there's no other comments, I'll entertain a motion.
I make a motion to approve the 2025 meeting schedule as presented.
All those in favor, raise your right hand. It's unanimous. All right, number 2, that's you too, Liz. We have the holiday schedule.
Yes, this is just resolution R019-2024 to adopt the town's 2025 holiday schedule.
Is there anything different on here than last year?
Same as last year, yes.
Okay. All right, there's no questions or comments. I'll entertain a motion.
I make a motion to approve the 2025 holiday schedule as presented.
All those in favor, please raise your right hand. That's unanimous. Number 3, that's you too, Liz. We have got some boards.
Yes, so due to term expirations in December 2024, we have vacancies on the following boards. We have 1 planning board vacancy that's in town. We have 2 ETJ member planning board vacancies. We have 1 ABC board vacancy and then 1 community development advisory board vacancy. In your packets, you should have all of their applications in order.
All right. Thank you very much, Liz. I'm just going to go in order here. So all of these are just regularly cycle offs from community development boards. It's nice to see that most of the people who are cycling off have reapplied. That's very encouraging. Let's start with ABC board. Mr. Dennis Gilby Jr., I think he's here with us tonight. Mr. Gilby, you are the one who is cycling off the ABC board and have applied to rejoin it again. All right, well, join us up here so we could just say hi.
I figured you were going to call me up.
That's it. That was just a very long me calling you up.
But yes, Mayor, Board, it's good to see you guys. Name's Dennis Gilby. Been living in Angier 7 years, a little over, maybe 7.5 now. Love it here. Love my time on the board. We've got a good thing going, I feel like. We've overcome a lot of obstacles this year, as you guys may know. But we've overcome them. We've come together as a board to agree to disagree in some cases, but ultimately do what is the best for our town and to help you guys out to do what we're doing here. I think it's been a good run, and I look forward to another 3 years if given the opportunity. So.
Any questions for Mr. Gilby while we have him up? Well, thank you very much.
We don't have to give you the usual heat because you've been here, done that. So
right. We don't have to grill you too hard.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. All right, with you guys' permission, we'll just appoint these board by board. We'll have to come back to it. So we have one application for ABC board.
Yeah.
We don't have to appoint him. We could leave it open. We have that option. Just putting that out.
I make a motion we approve Dennis Gilby as a representative on the ABC board.
All right. All those in favor, raise your right hand. That's unanimous. Thank you, sir. All right, planning board. We've got 3 folks that are cycling off the planning board. 1 is for in-town position and 2 for ETJ. In town, let's start with Myron Patterson. Join us up here, please. So Myron, you are cycling off, but you have reapplied to continue the good work with the planning board.
Yes, I have. Good evening. As you know, my name is Myron Patterson. At 93 Bracks Causeway here in Andrew. I have been living here for 14 years. I've been on the planning board. This is my second term, one term as chairman. So I'm also on the Rotary member. So, but I'm here tonight to be reappointed to the board. I feel that we had fun this year. So I have been privileged to work with amazing people here on the board and with the developers here in Andrew. As you heard earlier about the presentation, Andrew is growing, and we have a lot of developments here. And we want to work with developers to make those residents safe coming in and out of these developments. Also working with residents here with their rezoning of their properties to utilize their properties better. But in all, that's about it.
All right.
Here to, if you choose to, if not, it's okay. So, but, is there any questions?
Any questions for Mr. Patterson? Yeah,
Appreciate you.
thank you.
Thank you.
We do have another in-town applicant, Mr. Stephen Crisp. I don't know if he's here with us tonight. All right, we'll move on to ETJ. So Lee Marshall and Eric Julian are the two that are cycling off. They have both reapplied. We'll start with Mr. Lee Marshall. Good evening, sir.
Right. Good afternoon. My name's Harvey Lee Marshall. Live at 8051 210 North. Been on the board 15 years. I enjoyed working with the town people. I think it's growing a lot, and I like to be part of it.
All right. Any questions for him while we got him up here? 15 years, and you want to keep doing it.
Mhm.
Thank you, sir. All right, Eric Julian, I see you back there. Join us up here and show your face for a moment as well, please.
Mayor, Commissioners, so I've been on the planning board for this past year and it's filling a slot. So yeah, I'm looking forward to hopefully being on the planning board again. Really learned a lot. Want to give back to the town. So yeah. Keep
Well,
it short
thank
and sweet.
Ed, you've had some great questions along the way. So it's been a pleasure working with you so far. Mhm. Any questions for Mr. Julian? Thank you, sir. All right, we have one in town. Let's start with that one. Let's have a nomination for in-town planning board.
I make a motion we approve Myron Patterson to the planning board.
All right, all those in favor, please raise your right hand. That's unanimous. Thank you, sir. You're locked in. And we have two ETJ seats. So I'll entertain a motion for those.
I make a motion that we appoint Lee Marshall and Eric Julian.
All right, if you guys are good with doing a 2 and 1, and all those in favor, please raise your right hand. That's it. Thank you, guys. It's unanimous. All right, let's do Community Development Board. So we had one cycle off. They have not reapplied, but we've got some new applicants, some new faces tonight. Let's start with Miss Rhonda Powell. I know she's here with us. I know you've been sitting for a long time. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. That's okay. Okay. Good evening, Mr.
Hey.
Mayor and Board. My name is Rhonda Powell, and a lot of you know me as the cake lady at Brick and Mortar Grill. I have lived at 92 North Dunn Street here downtown since 1996. I moved here from Fredonia, New York in 1985, and I've been in the area since then. I'm applying for consideration to the Community Development Advisory Board. I feel being part of this board will be a good fit because I have 30-plus years of advertising, marketing, and customer service experience. From 1985 to 2010, I was a self-taught graphic designer. I designed advertising and collaborated on marketing campaigns in the newspaper and commercial print industry. I work closely with advertising reps and directly with customers. In the newspaper field, I have worked at many local newspapers, including the News and Observer, the Fuquay-Varina Newspaper Group, the Sampson Independent, the Dunn Daily Record, which included the Andrew Independent, which we used to have. I've received awards for my design work from the North Carolina Press Association, and I am familiar with many of the small business owners in this area because I used to design their ads and work with them. After the Fuquay-Varina newspaper group dissolved in 2010, I transitioned to banking and became the service manager at Wells Fargo Bank. Part of my responsibilities included bank compliance, coaching, overseeing the teller line, customer relations, and collaborating with other departments in the bank. My husband and I were also small business owners here in Angier. From 2004 to 2011, my husband was a commercial plumbing service rep for UPS, and I ran all of his administrative. For the past 10 years, I've been semi-retired. My husband is now disabled, and I assist him. But I am also a front desk associate at the Comfort Inn and Suites in Fuquay-Varina. I perform back office administrative duties, including training of our employees. I ensure we have the proper updated marketing materials displayed and work closely with guests and their requests. Thank you for your consideration. I look forward to the possibility of contributing to this board. We have been here in Angier a long time and not planning to go anywhere. Thank you.
Hang on, Ms. Powell. I'm going to ask you the same question that I ask all new faces.
Okay.
This board especially requires, a lot of input from this board. It takes time to show up to meetings.
Yes.
There's expectation of some volunteering. So I'll ask everybody just up front if you're aware of that and prepared to commit to that.
Yes. Yes. Be happy to do it.
Any other questions for Ms. Powell? All right, thank you, Ms. Powell.
Thank you.
We've got one other applicant, Leila Castillo. She's here with us tonight. Join us up here if you don't mind. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yes, good evening, everyone. My name is Leila Castillo. I live, do I have to state my address?
I think so. Just go
111
ahead.
Park Place Street, like right behind the park. Super excited to express interest in serving on the Community Development Advisory Board for the town that I love so much. I moved here in 2020, so like at the peak of like COVID, from Cary for many reasons, and I fell in love with Angier. I bring a professional background in business formation, taxes, and accounting. I bring a unique perspective and a deep commitment to fostering economic vitality and community growth. So through my work, I've had the privilege of assisting small businesses at every stage, from formation to sustained growth. The experience has given me valuable insights into the challenges and opportunities faced by local businesses, including myself. I am passionate about promoting Angier as an exciting place to live, shop, and invest. If I am elected, I bring understanding of business operations and economic strategies, and working closely with fellow board members, local businesses, and the community that I love so much. That's all.
Thank you. So I'll ask you the same question. The board especially requires a commitment of time and expectation of some volunteer help. That's something you're prepared to commit to?
I am.
All right.
Can I ask if you know of any community development spearheaded activities? Like, are you familiar with anybody on the board?
I am not.
Okay.
No, I work closely with other business owners in other towns.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm just ready to just like work here with the businesses here. Yeah. So, yeah. Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, so those are the two applications we have for one seat. And so I'll preface this by saying if you are not selected, please don't be discouraged. I'd love to have you come back and turn over. So anyone willing to apply and weigh in and help, we appreciate it very much. Is there any discussion or nomination?
I make a nomination for Ms. Costello to be appointed to the Community Development Advisory Board.
All right, there's no discussion. All those in favor, please raise your right hand. Opposed? 3-1. Thank you, Ms. Castillo. And thank you, Ms. Powell, for applying. All right, I believe that's all the advisory board seats for tonight. Find where we're at here. We're moving along more quickly now. All right. Number 4, Derek is going to speak to us tonight about the new park and some sponsorship
It gives me
ideas.
such a hard time about not ever coming up here, and I'm up here all the time now.
You didn't even
so
wear your tie
you
tonight,
convinced me. Yeah, I'm a little underdressed.
All right.
So please forgive me.
That's okay.
Hope everybody's doing well. Hope everybody had a great Thanksgiving. I'm here to ask the board to consider and approve sponsorship naming rights, dollar amounts, and the terms for the new town park. As I say that, I have had Dan look over that, and he has given his blessing, but he also has stated to us that we probably need you guys to adopt a policy moving forward in the near future on this part of it as well. So don't have to do that tonight. I just need to get your blessing on moving forward so we can start the marketing and get the ball rolling. So hopefully we don't have to borrow as much money as Davenport says we may have to borrow. So.
All right, so you were tasked with bringing us some numbers to start this. So you
Yes.
start the marketing, and then Dan will help us write policy around this
Yes.
at a later date, which is great. So the question I had, Derek, was,
Okay.
generally speaking, what did you use as a guideline, or how did you come up with the numbers on this list?
Our advisory board basically was tasked with part of this project. Actually, it's been a long time in the making. We started the advisory board to kind of get to this point with some of our facility needs, and we want to do this to give number one, to give some businesses, private citizens, the opportunity to put their name on some stuff if they want to do that, while also being able to have the town not incorporate the entire cost of this project. And we feel like that's a pretty big deal. But the advisory board did some research. They asked around to some local communities and towns kind of our size, and they came up with these numbers, and they approved them unanimously. And basically, it's like I told them, these numbers aren't set in stone. You know, you throw the hook out there to catch a big fish, and then if you've been fishing a while, you'll settle for the little fish. So that's kind of where we're at with it. And if we come back with different numbers later or lower numbers later, then we'll present that to the board as we get to that point. But right now we're at the point where we want to start and get moving on this, and this is the next step in the process, basically.
And where did the 6 years, so in the agenda that everyone could see, there's a
Yes.
list of
Yes.
amounts. Why 6 years?
That's what they wanted to do. I mean,
Okay.
I asked them the same
I'm just-
question, and they were like, this way it kind of spreads it out.
Mhm.
And, they wanted to do it over a process. Holly Springs Ting Park they're under their third contract with Ting now as a corporate sponsor. And they kind of did this similarly. And they wanted the opportunity to continue to re-up those naming rights contracts or sponsorship contracts by doing it, over an extended period of time instead of getting, obviously anybody would take one lump sum of 7 or 8 figures, but, it would decrease the upfront burden of the sponsorship amounts, and it would also help us kind of incorporate the amounts as the future allowed us to. So that's kind of what they came up with. And like I said, I gave my input a little bit, but I kind of let them take the ball and go with it. That's the whole point of putting this advisory board together. Because like I told them, I don't have all the answers, and we were really leaning on them to help, and they provided a lot of input, and I feel really good about the numbers. Hopefully we can catch some fish.
All right. Any questions, Derek, on this one, guys? Yeah, thank
they
you and
worked
your board
hard.
for
They
working
worked
on
hard.
it.
They did.
All right. If there's no other questions, I'll entertain a motion.
I make a motion to approve the sponsorship amount that was approved by the Parks and Rec Advisory Board on November 16th.
All right. All those in favor, please raise your right hand. Unanimous. Thank you, Derek.
Thank you, guys.
All right. Next up, we have Chief Thompson going to speak to us about an update to the police cadet program.
Hope everyone's doing well. Y'all been hearing me gagging back there. Last week I was under the weather and I still got a little cough going on. But
I hope you're feeling better.
I am. I'm coming before you tonight, hopefully to get our police cadet program updated. We're struggling with recruiting potential candidates for our cadet BLET program at the current pay we are offering. We have reached out to surrounding departments where their cadet program has been very successful. These departments are offering competitive wages and full-time employment during the cadet/BLET program. For our department to be competitive with surrounding departments, we are requesting to increase our cadet program pay and hire these cadets as full-time employees with benefits. We used to be able to go to BLET school and people were just waving their hands wanting jobs, and now most of them are spoken for before day one they even start the program. So in order for us to be able to compete with that, we've got to do the same thing.
Do you know when the last time that cost was visited?
Yeah, we wanted to start somewhere.
Yeah.
That just started this year, so correct.
Right.
Yeah, they signed a contract, correct.
18 just seems so low. I
It
mean, we're
is.
talking about 18,720, which is what we're currently offering.
Yeah.
With
Really
a
not
proposed
surprising.
increase to $41,000. So
And once they pass the state exam, and whenever they come on at that point, we would bring them in at our starting salary.
the starting, which is the 48.
Yes, ma'am.
Have you gotten anybody at 18,720?
No.
I don't know if you should answer that.
Don't answer.
Honestly.
Listen,
Don't
that's
answer
not
that.
even a part-time job. I mean, that's not even a.
We're not getting quality people, and I'm gonna just leave it at that.
Yeah.
That's fine. Yeah, we don't want to delve into personnel, but I mean, they clearly you provided us with a chart of everyone else's starting pay and a percentage
Yeah.
less that their cadet pay is, and I mean they're all 10% or less. Some of them are the same exact pay. But also, our base pay is a lot.
Yeah.
I'm just pointing that out anyway.
Yeah,
But
seeing what everybody else.
yeah.
We are, yeah.
But tonight we're going to talk about your cadets. So, thank you for putting this together. We definitely want you to have every advantage you can
We
to
want to be
recruit
successful.
great people for our town. So,
That's right.
are there any questions for Chief Thompson on this one? Then I'll entertain a motion.
I'll go ahead and make the motion that, recommendation to raise the cadet pay to 41,600.
All right. All those in favor, please raise your right hand. That's unanimous.
Thank y'all.
Go forth.
Thank you.
Get us some
we go.
good officers. All right. Next up, Elizabeth. We have got an MOU with the Angier Senior Center to consider.
Thank you. As you're aware, in years past, the town has made a donation to a few nonprofits within the Angier town limits. We would like to create a partnership with the Angier Senior Citizens Center to support their senior citizens health fair. The recommended amount of donation is $1,000. The MOU is for 2 years. Funds have already been budgeted in the the governing body's budget. And I'll be happy to answer any questions you have.
All right. So this is, we cannot simply, as a town entity, donate money to a charity. We must show that we
supporting a
receive,
program.
we receive something in return. In this case, that is a partnership.
That's right.
To help support their program. So this is just formally allowing us to provide that sponsor.
That's correct.
And it's something we've been doing for the past years anyway.
Mhm.
Correct.
All right. Any questions for Elizabeth on this one? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
I make a motion to approve the MOU with the Andrew Senior Center in support of their annual health fair.
All right, all those in favor, please raise your right hand. That's unanimous. Thank you, Elizabeth. You've got the next one too, a grant application for automatic doors at the library.
Yes, the director here contacted me about a grant that she wishes to apply for. There's more details in your packet. It's an opportunity through the Rural Accessibility Small and Rural Communities Program. And what this grant would do would automate our front doors, so it would be more accessible for those who have disabilities or people who have children in strollers. There's no impact to the town. We're simply asking for your approval for them to apply for the grant and for me to submit a letter of support on behalf of the town board.
All right. Any questions? Pretty cut and dry. I'll entertain a motion.
I make a motion to support the Andrew Library's grant application for updating the front doors to increase accessibility.
All right, all those in favor, please raise your right hand. That's unanimous.
Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. It says we're going to go back to Mr. Jimmy Cook for number 8 about the USDA loan and construction of the police station.
All right, it's me again, Margaret. All right, can you pull it up? Okay. All right, for you should have the action form, and I'll just kind of just read over the action form for the USDA grant that we're trying to apply for. In the spring of 2023, the board decided to pursue a USDA financing for a standalone police department. That town board directed the interim manager at the time to purchase the parcel along MacGyver Street for construction of this facility. The board decided to use the design-build method, which requires an initial budget to be set. The original budget was $5 million. Both the town's financial advisors and USDA recommended borrowing at least $6 million at that time. Once we awarded the design-build to Bobbitt, the town received their cost estimates from the design-build team, which was approximately 6.2 for construction, and includes a contingency budget of roughly 8% through Bobbitt, of roughly around $435,000. A large contributor to the cost of this site, which is the site work. I think I explained to you before, we've got to raise it up approximately 5 feet for drainage and different things like that. And so we reached back out to Bobbitt and said, look, you know, if it's cost $1 million for the site work, we thought that was a little bit high. And they confirmed their numbers, and it says it usually was high for the site work, but it was necessary. As explained, if you got drainage along there, we didn't even have enough room that the pipes will be sitting on top of the ground. So that's why we've got to come up the 5 additional feet to make it at grade with the existing MacGyver Street. USDA advised that all costs associated with the project, including legal fees, financial fees, construction, monitoring fees, contingency, and interim finance must be part of the loan. The manager had planned to use interim financing costs out of the general fund operating budget. USDA requirements raised the loan amount to $8,140,500. These are estimates, not final bids. So when Bobbitt gave us those numbers that I came before you a couple months ago, that $6.2 million, they reached out to basically one vendor, give me your numbers. Now, if we move forward, he'll actually bid that out to 3 different vendors for electrical, HVAC, and we'll have a truer budget instead of just having one number from one particular vendor. So that should hopefully tighten that budget up a little bit more. There again, the estimates are not final bids. Inflation has stabilized lately, but the initial cost of $5 million was set almost a year and a half ago, and construction costs have risen anywhere from 12 to 15%. We all have seen that. The total budget, so what we're required through USDA and what we're required, what Bobbitt has in theirs, there's roughly about 13% contingency, which is about $735,000. And that's put in there as one requirement from USDA. And so that way, if we have something that we didn't account for, that's what that contingency will put in. You're basically doing worst-case scenarios, what if? So that's what we're looking at. Hopefully, if we don't have to use any of that, then that will actually drop our number down. If we don't have to use any contingency, from roughly 8,100,000 to roughly 7.4 if we don't have to utilize that. So we're looking at roughly about a 7,000 square foot building. The 7,000 foot building was designed for their current needs and their future needs. So we won't be coming back 2 or 3 years from now and saying we didn't build this big enough. We're expecting for 20 to 25 years of growth. We also did put in there if we needed to expand that at a later time, that we could do that. We figured that in as part of the design as well. All right, and so what we're coming for you tonight is staff recommends the board authorize a loan amount of $8,140,500. If the total project cost is less than the 8.1 million, the amount borrowed will decrease on that. Okay, and then once we actually have a debt service number, they require us to take 10% of that and set aside in a different fund. That way, if we can't make our payments 1 year, that covers that. And here before you, you've got the pre-GMP guaranteed maximum price. We sent this to you a couple weeks ago. You looked over. One of the things that we actually had taken out was on column B. So I think you saw when we purchased the property at McGyver Street, it was $262,500. We had that in our initial numbers, but we've already paid that. So if the board chooses to put that back in, that will increase that bottom number by that amount. So we paid for it, but do you want to get reimbursed for it? So basically, you would be financing, an additional $262,000 at 3.8%. If you look at it that way, I think that's what Kyle gave you earlier in his report, that if the USDA loan is approved, it's at 3.8%. And then also for the environmental, on column D, we actually had paid that. We did environmental 1 and 2 study. Those costs end up being roughly around $26,000. We've already paid the vendor for that. So those numbers, we just took those out. You can add those back in, but it will increase your amount. So in essence, if you wanted to add those 2 numbers back in, then you're looking at about a $8.4 million loan if you want to repay yourself for the land purchase and the environmental. So as you can see, you can kind of go through those line items there. And so for construction, we're at 6.2. That was the number that we had received from Bobbitt. All right. Then again, we took out the land rights. If you want to add that back in, we can add that back in. Legal services, that's when we close on the USDA loan from Pope and Pope. It's roughly about $15,000. There again, environmental was the 26 we took out. We can add that back in. Direct expenditures, utility hookups, that's water and sewer taps. So we actually took that number out, so we won't charge ourselves, even though we should charge. We're not. So. All right. Movable equipment, which is your fixtures and equipment. That's roughly about $500,000. We were able to save the town some money by moving in a generator from a site that's going to be decommissioned probably within the next year. So we're going to move that generator and use that at the new site. And then you've got the interim construction interest. And that fee's around $775,000 for that. There again, if you go back and look to the notes to the side, for $200K for 3.2 million, if you double that, that's only $400,000. But there again, USDA takes worst case scenarios, so we have to add those numbers in. Those numbers are coming from USDA. All right. Then again, in our construction contingency is 5% of the project, so that's roughly around $300,000. And then you've got the other expenses, which is your third-party construction monitoring. Since this is a USDA loan, we are required to hire a third party to come and do the concrete testing and materials testing for the site. And then also Davenport, which we need Davenport to go and do the financial study for us so we can provide that to USDA to help us with those numbers. And also whenever we go to the LGC to present them to do the loan. And then bond counsel, even though we're not doing bonds, we use Sam Anderson to help us with LGC to get the loan and everything approved. And then you've got other administrative costs. So that's where we're at in a nutshell. There again, we designed this building, based on what the board was looking at, $5 million and roughly 7,000 square feet. And again, when you do a design build, you actually choose the vendor first. It's not like going to a car dealership and say, okay, what are you going to give me for this car? What are you going to give me? What are you going to give me? You can't do it that way. You do it on their qualifications, and then you choose the vendor for design build. I think 3 of your board members have sat on and going through that process with us to help us choose our vendor. What you do, you get your vendor chosen, then you start coming up with design, on what you want to do. Do you want it 1 story, 2 stories? What are you looking at building? And so they work with us as design build. And when you do design build, it cuts out a lot of that cost, where if you had it designed first, then you send it to a contractor, he's going to say, well, you need to change this, this, and this. Then you start getting into change orders. You work those design build together, and you eliminate a lot of those change orders. And we're ready for questions.
Thank you, Jimmy. Any questions for him?
So this feels deja vu. So we sat here and we approved an increase to $6.5 million with our initial loan request.
Yes, ma'am.
We have all since communicated with y'all because USDA came back and said something slightly different than we had initially anticipated, which means that we have now grown our loan into this $8.1 million. He has the spreadsheet here that was presented to all of us, and it helped us to understand where some of those additional costs came in. And if you can't see it, I'm sure Liz would blow it up a little bit more. The 6.2 is staying the same. That was brought before us last month with Bobbitt. That was the initial amount that we were going to ask for the loan, was just for the cost of the build, right? And since USDA has come back and said, no, hold on, actually, and here we are with this larger amount. None of us take this lightly. This is a substantial increase. Now I want to iterate to the public that's here tonight and those that are watching online that all of us, staff included, pumped the brakes really hard and said, hold on, what are we doing? How did we get here? Why are we here? They allowed us to ask hard questions, and we're very prepared with answers and how we got to this point. And so I want to thank staff for your diligence in this and trying to navigate the difficult process that is USDA, because I understand that it's first time for everybody in this circumstance for applying with USDA. So all that to say, this is not, we didn't get here very easily. There's been a lot of effort along the way. So I want to acknowledge that.
Yes, ma'am. And once we left that meeting and you approved the 6.5, then next day, Elizabeth and I went to USDA and said, okay, here's what the board's approved. And he says, well, if you're going to do that, then this changes all these numbers. It rolls down the hill. So. And we're hoping with the contingencies that we have, and hopefully everything goes well, then we could possibly knock off $1 million off of that loan amount. So,
I think you.
Yeah, I think ultimately the USDA just wants to ensure that we get this done fully complete. They're making us include furniture. They're making us build up contingencies. So again, we hope that we are not going to use the full 8.14, but USDA wants to make sure that if we approve this and we take this loan, that it's going to get built and finished and moved into. And and I think, I've spoken to everyone up here throughout this whole process, and none of us want to cut pieces off this project to meet some budget that we had in our mind. I think if we're going to build a building, then we don't want to touch it for the next 20 years. Be great. 30 years would be better. You know, it's large enough for us to grow into, and so hopefully, you know, it's not going to get any cheaper than that. In 2 years it'll be $10 million. In 10 years it'll be 15. We'll be kicking ourselves for not having built it now. So that's my approach to this.
And as you mentioned, you're looking for the future growth. If
Yeah.
you wanted to build something just to house, the 25 officers that they have now, then, you're cutting that building in half. But what are you doing? So in, a couple of years, I mean, he's getting ready to hire more officers just from what you approved tonight. So,
Right. And we don't want to see him anymore. You got a training center. We want to give him this police station and then just do good.
There's some discussion I wanted to have amongst our board in terms of the removal of the land and the costs associated with the testing that we had done.
That were removed, and you want
that were removed.
Potentially consider adding them back into.
I just want to make sure that everybody's heard in that capacity that, there was a thought process with it being all inclusive, including being reimbursed for things that we've already paid for. There was a reasoning behind that, and so I want to make sure that we're all understanding that, while we've paid for the land already.
Correct. That would be the question. Do you want to reimburse yourself? If you do, then that loan amount would go up. So
Right.
in theory, where you took money out of your fund balance at the time to pay for that lot, then you've got it now free and clear. So I guess you could look at it this way, and I'm not a banker, I just do Jimmy Cook math, that if you took your $262,000 and it's going to cost you 3.8%. Do you take that and keep that in somewhere else and actually gain more in somewhere else? So
I guess the question is that, if we had to earmark that reimbursement for something, we might want to consider adding back.
And that's at discretion of the board. We can add that back in if you want to put it back, both those numbers back in, and we'll send that back off to USDA, and hopefully shouldn't change these, I wouldn't think, too terribly much, just by adding those two numbers back in.
I don't think that would change the contingency, and I guess it could potentially change the interim construction interest, although that is a bit of an overestimate based on what I've seen.
Didn't this put it in for? I thought.
All out right now.
I thought this figure was added in already.
It was when we initially when we initially saw, after we met with the USDA, where those numbers went up, we were trying to get them back down and said, well, we've already paid for it. Why do we want to borrow the money again and pay interest on that and repay ourselves for that? So that was our thinking, to take that out.
But there's an advantage about adding it back in. Am I correct?
Say again, sir?
There would be an advantage of us adding that back in. Am I not correct?
Your advantage would be you'd be repaying yourself the money you took out of fund balance, but at 3.8%.
Right. But we can use that money for something else. I'm not mistaken, correct?
If you wanted to take that, you would put it back. Right. You would reimburse yourself.
Right.
But you'll be paying for it for the next 30 years.
Right.
Go ahead.
Could you ask the question?
Well, I don't know how much we can say.
It's tricky because some of the thought process in this involve protected closed session stuff. Yeah. So we all want to be extremely transparent with the public, but we're all trying to dance around. I think, though, that we are all on the same page
Right.
with what we're
Right.
talking about.
Right,
Yeah.
so you know where.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
We just
ultimately, the reason will be made public, but
We
at
just
this time, can't discuss all that, which is making us all feel kind of weird up here. So,
We're just gonna make you sweat a little bit.
yeah.
Not for long.
Jimmy doesn't sweat. He's got guys for that. All right. So thank you for bringing that up. Are there any other questions for Jimmy about this?
If we wanted to have conversation though about adding the land back into that, and it's conversation that we would need to have in closed session.
Let me ask you this, guys. Can we
they know what we're talking
Could you,
can we postpone this till after our closed session?
what,
when we
well,
get
what I
back
was
in?
going to say is when you come back from closed session, you can make a motion in open session to amend the USDA loan amount.
Right.
Okay. So will we still make a decision now and then amend it after closed session? Or should we just table it until?
You don't even need to table it. It's the same meeting.
Okay.
Put it on.
All right.
The initial conversations that we had with staff were that the land was included. So we understand that there's a thought process behind the land no longer being included. I need to hear it so that I can
Yeah.
understand why. And then
Yeah. Well, if it's all right with you guys, then let's just defer.
I
the
don't have a
motion on this one.
preconceived.
Yeah, let's, yeah.
But we'll defer the motion on this one until
Again,
after closed session.
closed session.
Okay. Thanks, Jimmy.
All right, so I'm still employed, all right, for right now.
Well,
now.
we haven't had closed
Right now.
session yet,
All
so.
You'll be fine. You'll be fine.
All right, thank
All
you.
right. Moving on, number 9, Derek. You're back again. In a different capacity this time. We're almost on the last page, guys.
Yeah, almost done.
I know, right? I feel like it's
been like that for a while,
Yeah. I'm asking the board to consider and approve extending the contract with Thompson, Price, Scott, Adams, and Company, PA, to audit accounts. Extended contract, it was actually through October 31st of 2024. We'd like to extend that to January 31st of 2025 to allow our CPA contracted CPA Chris Abbott a little bit more time to get our financials together from the past fiscal year, so we can turn it over to the auditors, and they can do their job.
All right. Any questions, Derek, on this?
we're doing this so that we don't get in any trouble.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
We're not in trouble.
No, we're not in trouble.
Okay.
And we did find out that 70% of local governments are in the same position as us, asking for
That I don't want to
extensions.
be 70%.
We don't, but we've had some situations and some circumstances here that we did not plan on as well. So
Absolutely.
Yeah.
hopefully next year we're not in the same situation. That's the goal.
I don't want to make it a habit.
No.
Yeah, so to be clear, this item includes what looks like an extension to filing the audit,
Yep.
and they have a list of reasons. The second one on the list, the one we've chosen, which is issues with staff turnover and workload, and so they're not surprised to
And
see
we
stuff like
have
this.
found out through this process, there's not a lot of accounting firms that do local government audits anymore. It's really hard to find them, and they're slammed with this, with all this stuff too. So that's part of it as well.
And we've been with them for what?
It's
For a
been
while?
a few years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it make no sense in changing now. They got to know our,
Right.
got all our stuff.
Right.
We need a motion?
Yes.
I'd like to make a motion that we go ahead and consider the approval of the extension of the current contract with Thompson, Price, Scott, Adams, and Company.
All right. All those in favor, please raise your right hand. It's unanimous.
Thank you,
Thank
guys.
you, Derek. All right. We are going to move on to the manager's report and a strategic plan update.
Great, thank you. It's hard to believe that we are in December and getting ready to start a new year. As you all have heard, we have many projects that are moving forward, and Jimmy and I were talking about those today. They're all going to bloom this spring, so we're going to be very busy this spring. I want to welcome Kayla Byington. She joins the town in the role of Events and Marketing Coordinator. She started yesterday. And then we will welcome our first intern, Riley Tester, from Campbell University next month. She's interested in a career in local government, and her dad works as the Public Works Director for Salisbury. Our strategic plan, so hopefully everyone can remember our, I think it's 5 priorities here. Yes, 5 priorities. So the first, to plan and implement sustainable infrastructure. We have 3 that are proceeding as planned. That's the Junie Road water tank, the core water line replacement, and update on the pedestrian plan, which is almost complete. We are working on the priority 5 and 4 and 5 sewer line rehabilitation, and we are continuing to work on mitigation measure number 3, which is the culvert project at Broad Street. Operating as an excellent public service organization, we have already checked off 3 of our tasks, which was to implement a building inspection software and the building inspections department, replace computers and other hardware on recommended schedule, and implement merit pay increases. That was done in this budget year. We're continuing to hold our quarterly listening sessions, and we're going to begin conducting stay interviews with our employees to understand what benefits they might need from the organization. Promote community and economic development. We've checked off 1, which was establishing a nonprofit organization. We're still utilizing social media and other forms of communication to promote the town. That'll be ongoing. Monthly community development advisory board meetings, those are ongoing. And then we have a few that have not begun yet, so we will continue to work on those. Responsibly manage residential growth. So the first one, we are proceeding as planned, which is fund and launch the comprehensive land use planning process, and you had an update on that tonight. We have adopted conditional zoning and architectural standards. You did that earlier this year. We have not begun rewriting the Unified Development Ordinance, and we are going to schedule a board work session on housing needs and affordability for housing in Angier. Develop an outstanding parks and recreation system. So we've completed a land acquisition for entryway into our park. We've begun the decommissioning process of the spray fields. We have not started construction on phase 1, but we do have a scope of work with an engineering firm to get that started. We are going to pursue grant funding opportunities in the new year, and we have established a Parks and Recreation Advisory Board. And last but not least, provide a high level of public safety. We are expanding training opportunities for all staff. I know 1 member has signed up for the crisis intervention training. We have upfitted our vehicles with radar and purchased a LiDAR system. We have installed the license plate readers. We've purchased and installed new radar speed limit signs for Broad Street. We've selected a design build contractor, and we are continuing monthly awareness posts on social media and working to secure funds from USDA for the new police station.
All right. Thank you, Elizabeth. We have, like every month, staff reports from all the department heads that are part of the agenda packet. If anyone cares to read all the details of it, does anyone want to come up this evening and say anything? We've seen almost all of you up here already anyway.
I'd like to acknowledge the Public Works Department for the Christmas decorations. They busted the bus getting those up, and they look awesome.
All right, so he does not have a microphone, so everyone listening out there, we're thanking Public Works for getting on top of the Christmas decorations. I believe they're all out, lit. We're good to go. We're ready for the lighting on Friday. That's right. So thank you for bringing that up, and thank you to the Public Works Department and everyone else that was involved in that. There's no other staff that's going to speak. We'll move to Mayor and Town Board reports. It has been a year for the majority of this board up here, and it's been a year. I can speak for myself when I say it's been a year, but I am just as optimistic, if not more, than a year ago today. We've gotten a lot of, I hesitate to say a lot done. We've made a lot of decisions. But the slow grinding wheels of government, you know, it's hard to see a lot of reward from that yet, but it's coming. So thank you guys for making my last year this much fun. Elizabeth asked us a couple months ago to think of smaller initiatives, not big picture stuff, but smaller things that we wanted to visit in 2025. I emailed everyone up here about a week ago to collect that, and then I provided my own list to them too. So I'll just burn through this really quickly. This is a list of not that we're going to do, but things that we might want to explore. I'll go through really quickly. A lot of this is not really surprising. I have noticed, there's all kinds of ditch clearing and grass maintenance around sidewalks and right-of-ways. There might be a gap between what our ordinance says versus the way things have been done, and it's causing some confusion for the public about whose responsibility is what. So I, for one, would like to visit our ordinance, decide if we need to change any of it, and then enforce what we leave in it. That was one of them. I've noticed that the town does own a lot of its own security cameras in several buildings, though they are not interconnected. So sometimes I know the police have to go to different buildings to collect video footage. Sometimes it doesn't always work. So I would like to explore the potential for a singular NVR network video recorder system that the police can access, the detectives can access from their desk, cloud-based. The Christmas decorations are all up. It is a good time for us over the next month to check it all out, see if we care to make any upgrades or changes to it. Just something I had on my list. At Lillington Street and Broad Street, they have painted a new crosswalk down there by Thanks a Lot. I use that area a lot. Some of us do. It's kind of weird when you're on Lillington Street because there's very little visibility to the light. So I have noticed that a lot of people are treating that on their own as a four-way stop because those giant crosswalks start to confuse people. And I think that we should visit whether or not we want to actually make that into a four-way stop. It doesn't seem like it would impede much traffic, but it would increase the safety of people trying to cross Broad Street with that limited visibility. Several months ago, we talked about a pedestrian handicap access ramp in front of Forest Fitness. We kind of talked about what that would cost, and then it kind of fell off to the wayside. I've noticed several times people parking in the crosswalk, like a parking space, which, the nearest handicap ramp is at the light. And so there's already some challenges, and it's certainly much more difficult for even able-bodied pedestrians when there's a car parked in the crosswalk in front of Forest Fitness. So I remember that when we discussed the ramps, we talked about it would need to include curbing that extended out and lose the parking space, which really is not a parking space. So I think we need to revisit that soon, see if that's something we want to do. And then the depot for maintenance and repair. There's been some floor rot, there's been some moisture issues. I'd like to at least look into seeing what we could do. The part of it by the sidewalk on the museum end is very close to the ground underneath, what's causing a lot of that. No vapor barrier, but I want to explore preserving that building so we don't lose it by significant parts of it. That's what I had on my list. If you guys have anything you want to add, again, that was not stuff that we need to do, just thoughts, things that we could bring up. So if you guys have any, now's a great time to share. Yeah. And then, it'll be an ongoing thing as things pop up.
And I don't know that I'm necessarily seeking out. I know that a lot of the projects that we've started this year and things that have come up have just been things that have come up. We've found out a necessity that we wanted to address. So certainly big project wise, we have our sights set. I'm all for making what we have sure. You know, we've grown departments and a lot of change and turnover. I want to make sure we're very strong at our base so that we can provide the very best for our citizens. So I know that everybody's working really hard to get us there. So.
All right. It's not a list of what we expect to see next month. It's just an accumulation of small things that are not super pressing. All right. I lost my agenda, but I think we're at the point where we need a motion to enter closed session.
I make a motion we go into closed session regarding personnel and land acquisition.
All those in favor, please raise your right hand.